Space Marine 2 is the brand new Warhammer video game that is taking the internet by storm, and there are some choices that you'll need to make early on in the game to make sure you don't make any mistakes with respect to the class that you choose to play. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at all 6 of the classes in Space Marine 2, and I'll be telling you everything that you need to know about each class with some tips on how to play them so that you can make sure that you're making the best decision for yourself and pick the right class that fits your own playstyle. At a glance, we'll be taking a look at the versatility of the Tactical Marine, the Juggernaut that is the Assault Marine, the Berserker who is the Vanguard, the impenetrable and some would say mighty fortress of a defense that is the Bulwark, the high damage long-ranged expert that is the Sniper, and lastly the insanely powerful Space Marine just called Heavy. Before we jump in, I wanted to put something a little time sensitive on your radar. So I've been playing this game for a long time now, and it happens to be running its biggest event yet to date called the Asgard Divide. It's an event themed around Norse mythology with characters like Loki, Thor, Freya, and Odin. Between now and October 23rd, you can get the legendary champion Loki the Deceiver for free simply by logging in for 7 days. And these event champions always end up being the most broken, overpowered champions in the game, and they only come around one time, so I would say even if you aren't looking to play this game long term, it still would be wise to create an account, collect Loki, and let him sit there and just play with me casually, and that way if you ever do decide to play the game long term, you already have Loki and you didn't miss him. My favorite thing about this game is all of the strategy that goes into building teams to clear dungeons, and the PvP is actually really fun as well. It's basically a big game of chess with really cool looking champions that all have strengths in their own regard. New players, if you click my link or scan my QR code, you will also get $60 worth of really nice in-game loot for free in the form of epic boss killer Grizzled Jarl as well as Knight Errant once you reach level 25. Raid Shadow Legends doesn't do a ton of massively large events like this one very often, so if you're interested in playing it casually, again, hit my link or scan my QR code, come find me in-game under the name Dantis, join my clan, and we'll explore Asgard together. The Tactical Marine is the do-it-all Marine, so this is the class that I would say you should pick for all of your campaign and PvP operations, at least at the beginning of the game, just to get a good handle on how to play. The Tactical Marine has tools for all aspects of combat, and they also have the largest pool of ranged weapons to choose from. You can choose the Stalker Bolt Rifle for long-range engagements. You can pick the Bolt Rifle Carbine for close-range and rapid-fire engagements, and they also have the Plasma Incinerator and the Melter Rifle for just wiping foes off the face of the map. Now, because your primary weapon choice is so expansive with the Tactical Marine, the only drawback is that you're restricted to only using the chainsaw melee, which isn't actually a bad thing because I think the chainsaw really is also your do-it-all melee weapon, being that it has really good single target damage as well as AoE crowd control damage. Now, the Tactical Marine in terms of abilities has an ability called the Auspex Scan, which reveals enemies within the area and also weakens them, making them more vulnerable to damage. I think I've had the most fun in this game playing in the co-op with the Tactical Marine because basically if you go in as the Tactical Marine, your teammates will love you because you're just constantly lighting all of your enemies up, weakening them, and making it really easy to just mow down everything in front of you. When it comes to the class perks for the Tactical Marine, you'll look at it and immediately recognize that most of them focus on the Auspex Scan and your primary weapons. For the class perk Balanced Distribution, it actually buffs your primary weapon damage by 10% and weakens your secondary weapons by 10%, so more of a focus on your primary. This inherently buffs the range damage, which makes sense because the rest of your team perks also buff range weapon damage, as we'll see here in just a moment. This means that if you party up with the Heavy or Sniper class Marines, which we'll talk about in just a moment, they will love you because of all the buffs you give to their damage dealing weapons. As an alternate, you can choose to specialize with the Plasma Incinerators or the Multi-Melter weapons by choosing the Plasma Boost perk, which increases your damage of the Plasma Incinerator by 30% when it's overheated, or the Emperor's Vengeance perk, which helps you to have a steady stream of ammo for your heaviest hitting weapons. With the versatility and the wide range of weapon choice to the insane buffs that the Tactical Marine brings to the table, you really can't go wrong by picking the Tactical Marine. Some would say the Tactical Marine is for the boys, and I like that, and you should like the video. Next up is the Assault Marine. Now, the Assault Marine is for those of you that like to rush in and just leave a wake of destruction. So the Assault Marine doesn't really care about counting the cost of jumping into a cluster of Tyranids. They just do it and make them regret that they ever spawned. This class lacks access to primary weapons, so it's really limited only to pistols and melee weapons. But that's okay, because the Assault Marine makes up for the lack of primary weapons with insane maneuverability and devastating melee weapons. The Assault Marine is given a jump pack that basically lets you jump up into the air, focus on a central point within a cluster of Tyranids, and just rain down destruction from the heavens with your hammer. The jump pack also gives you versatility in that it kind of functions like a thruster pack to enable you to close the gap on enemies that you might be needing to get close to, or escape if you're getting overwhelmed and need to take a step back. So since this is really a melee focused Marine, what you're going to want to do, and one of the coolest things you can do, is move behind the enemy lines, devastate the clusters of Tyranids, and also close the gap on ranged enemies that might be sitting in the back lines trying to shoot your team from afar. The Assault Marine has access to the Thunder Hammer, the Chainsword, and the Power Fist, all of which focus on slower but heavy hitting charge swings that cause destructive blows to anything you throw them at. You also have access to the pistol, which is not bad because it basically has hit scan and it's very accurate. So a lot of players will actually use this to get a few shots in as they close the gap, waiting for their jetpack charges to reset, and then they'll use the jetpack to jump in and destroy some enemies. The Assault Marine really shines in this kind of role where you jump into clusters of enemies, you destroy most of them with the initial landing blow, and then you just clean them up with the rest of your close range weapons while your teammates focus on important targets like elite enemies. You can think of this guy kind of as like your bruiser slash crowd control Marine. When it comes to perks, the Assault Marine gets a couple cool ones. First one being Ascension, which says that when you use your jump pack leap, it actually deals damage to enemies that are in the takeoff area, so it can finish off enemies that might be on the weak side. And it also gets Smiting Angel, which increases ground pounds damage by 10%. The only thing to be mindful of with the Assault Marine is that you need to manage your jump pack charges well. What do I mean by that? Well, you want to make sure that you at least always have one jump pack charge on deck even while you're fighting, in case you need to escape if you get overwhelmed or if you quickly need to pivot to help a teammate that's in need. You can do this simply by approaching enemies without using the jetpack, because you actually have a class perk called Winged Fury, which says that damage from melee attacks executed while sprinting or dashing are increased by 25%. This is another class that you simply cannot go wrong with. Next up is the Vanguard. Now, just like the Assault Marine, the Vanguard's kit is also melee focused, but it's a little different. The Assault Marine is good at clearing hordes, but the Vanguard is going to be your 1v1 high damage destroyer. The Vanguard, being another melee-focused class, also has extremely good movement, just like the Assault Marine does, but most of it comes from its grappling launcher, which lets you target an enemy, get your hooks into them, and then pull yourself up close to kick them. Now, when it comes to weapons, the Vanguard has a few options, but the bread and butter of this class is going to be the combat knife. Why do I say that? Well, the combat knife is extremely effective because it enables you to grapple, move close to your enemy, and then follow up with a rapid succession of attacks to focus down enemies like elites pretty quickly. The other options are the Instigator Bolt Carbine, which is an okay ranged option, but the best options are going to be the Oculus Bolt Carbine or the Melter Rifle. The Oculus Bolt Carbine can be used kind of as an SMG at a close range to spray enemies quickly, but the Melter Rifle is probably the most fun and probably the best because it can stun your enemies and enable you to reset your melee combos mid-fight. When it comes to perks for the Vanguard, your perks mostly focus on keeping you in the fight for longer so that you can target elite enemies mostly and stay in the fight. The moving target perk says that each melee attack you land reduces the range damage you take by 1% up to 15%. So this effectively just lets you laugh while the ranged Tyranids take shots at you as you take down their elite commanders. Other perks like Shockwave or Close Combat Focus buff your close combat skills, encouraging you to dive in and fight rather than sit back and play it safe like some of the other classes we'll talk about. The Vanguard is an insane insane Space Marine, and I think this guy's going to be really good at PvP. Now, every good game has a tank, and the tank of this game is certainly the Bulwark. Well, one of the first things to note is that the Bulwark's massive shield comes with some restrictions, like access to primary range weapons. It sounds scary, but this class makes up for it with its abilities. Now, the Bulwark's weapon options are almost exactly the same as the Assault Marine's options, but instead of the hammer, it gets swapped out for access to the power sword. Now, the power sword is interesting. It has two modes. The first mode is rapid attack mode, which is best for single target DPS. You swing it quickly and you do a bunch of damage. The second mode is called power mode. This one is for some slow, heavy hitting charged attacks that are really good for ad clearing, but not so great at single target DPS. The Storm Shield is just a tank of a weapon because it basically makes you invincible against melee attacks and ranged enemies, so long as you keep your shield up in between strikes. The Bulwark has a perk called Armor of Contempt, which is essentially a reflect damage that says when you block a ranged attack, enemies within a 10-meter radius take damage instead. So that's very good if you find yourself in a wave, or if your group is taking a bunch of ranged damage and you're getting overwhelmed up close. Your Bulwark can throw up his shield and reflect all that damage to the adds in front of him, which makes it easier on the rest of your team. The Bulwark also has this insane ability called the Chapter Banner. When you throw this thing down, it restores armor to all teammates in its area of effect, and think of this as kind of your paladin bubble. So you use it when your squad is expecting to take a bunch of damage, and it helps keep everyone topped up from a shield perspective to make sure you don't have any spooky situations. This class is extremely effective at mitigating nearly all the damage that your party would take on missions, as long as you have your shield up and your teammates are doing damage and making sure that no enemies get behind the front lines to poke you in the back. This class does take a little bit of practice to master, but a good Bulwark player is essential for progression if you want the higher level difficulty missions to be a breeze for you. Next up is the Sniper. Oh, the Sniper. He's going to be your roguelike high damage assassin class for you sneaky boys out there. He's similar to the Vanguard in that his job is to focus on high value and elite targets, except from a distance. The Sniper focuses on moving around the map stealthily with his cloaking ability, focusing down high value targets while also playing the super important role on your team, reviving allies with ease. More on that later. In terms of weapons, the Sniper has several options. So it's got access to the Stalker bolt rifle, which is going to be your more versatile, kind of decent for close range and decent for long range. Think of it kind of like a DMR. And secondly, it has access to the bolt carbine, which again is going to be like your SMG that you use to clear out enemies in a pinch if they get close to you. But the real money is with the Sniper long range heavy guns. The Sniper has access to the Bolt Sniper and the Las Fusil, which are going to be your bread and butter as this class. The Bolt Sniper is the king of taking down elites, as it pretty much has the best headshot damage in the entire game. The Las Fusil is a single shot kind of beam rifle / laser type weapon that needs to be charged in between shots. This can make it a challenge for when your enemies get close, but the one-shot capability of this thing really does make it a potent option, especially if you play around your defensive or melee teammates properly. It can also over-penetrate, which means that it can have some use with taking out multiple lower rank enemies in a pinch. Now, looking at this class overall, the Sniper really is going to be your typical glass cannon, meaning that you do a bunch of damage, but you're also kind of squishy. So you're really going to need a reliable way to escape danger when it presents itself, which is good because you have this ability called the Camo Cloak, which makes you invisible so that you can stay alive. Once activated, this Camo Cloak can help you do a few things. First of all, it can help you gain advantage on an initial engagement. You can use it to break contact if you're already getting overwhelmed or attacked. You can also use it to reposition to get a better angle on a boss, or even sneak behind enemy lines and, yes, revive your downed allies without being detected. This is super helpful. You even get bonuses for sneaking around, like the fact that you do bonus damage when you take your first shot out of invisibility, so this is good for things like taking down bosses and other high value elite targets. The class and team perks on this guy show just how potent the Sniper can truly be. The perk Block Break increases damage against shielded enemies by 25%. Evasion automatically activates Camo Cloak every 15 seconds after you perfectly time a dodge without spending a charge. And Marksman increases your headshot damage by 10% for all squad members. Your teammates will be thanking you. As a sniper, where you really shine is when you kind of stay in the back lines, you're avoiding close combat by cloaking and repositioning and supporting your teammates with calculated high damage sniper shots, taking out all of the elite enemies in the shadows, while the rest of your teammates clear out the rank and file Tyranids that are trying to get behind them and interrupt you doing the massive amounts of damage that you are. Personally, this is my favorite Space Marine, and it's my go-to as long as I have a good group to keep the Tyranids off of me. And finally, the Heavy Space Marine. Now, the Heavy Space Marine is exactly what it sounds like. It's a Marine that specializes in big, heavy weapons exclusively and plays the role of the long-range nuke Marine, but also plays kind of a support role. So the Heavy Space Marine is similar to the Sniper in that he really likes dealing damage from a distance, but it also does so with massive AoE weapons rather than single target snipers. The only weird thing is that the Heavy doesn't actually have any melee weapons. Yeah. Alternatively, the Heavy takes the violent approach and just swings its massive guns at its enemies for some home-style bludgeoning. The melee damage from the Heavy isn't insane per se, but that's okay because it's mostly used to push back Tyranids and create space for your team so that you can start shooting again. Those big heavy weapons are good though because the Heavy has access to 3 ranged weapons that really are all you need in terms of coverage. The Heavy Plasma Incinerator is for dealing damage to elites from a distance. The Multi-Melter, well, melts waves of enemies and elites that get up close, and the Heavy Bolter is for consistent crowd control DPS. The Heavy has a super cool ability called the Iron Halo, which blocks all incoming range damage for you and your allies, and your allies can actually shoot from behind it as well, which is really cool. The thing that makes the Heavy shine really is its ability to do massive damage from a distance, defend against waves of Tyranids that are more range focused, and you can also use them to advance through a battlefield and revive allies with the Iron Halo active to protect yourself and your downed teammates. When it comes to perks, the Heavy is very useful as a party member. This is where kind of the support role comes into play. He has Encompassing Aegis, which gives your entire squad a damage reduction by 20% to all ranged attacks, which is very good. It also has Overwhelming Power, which increases the range damage of your allies by 10% if they're within 10 meters of your Iron Halo. So these are essentially your buff and burn perks for big encounters with DPS checks. The Heavy also gets access to Restoration, which says that taking down 10 enemies in rapid succession will restore 1 armor segment every 15 seconds. And this is going to be easier for you as the Heavy because, again, all of your weapons revolve around doing a ton of mass AoE damage. If you're leaning more towards the Multi-Melter and Plasma Incinerator, you can use perks like Multi-Kill and Thermal Boost, which recover ammo on defeats and also increase damage as you fire, respectively. So what do you guys think? What class are you going to play and why? Did I miss anything, or did you guys discover any like secrets or OP combos during your gameplay that you can share with everyone? Let me know down below in the comments. Subscribe if you're new, slay Terminids until the dawn breaks, and thank you again, Raid Shadow Legends, for sponsoring today's video. Good day.